So coming up this weekend is going to be Contender Series week number 3 of the 2024 season, and so far my predictions have been going pretty good. Went 4-1 on week number 1, went 5-0 last week, and I feel like this is a very tough week to predict, and that could potentially be a week where things do go a little bit sideways, because I am a little bit nervous about the picks on this card. It is a very difficult card to predict overall, but I do think that it is going to have a lot of finishes. I think there's a lot of fun fights on this card as well, even if I do think that they might go the distance. But overall, I think that this is a very good card, and I am looking forward to this Contender Series one here. Of course, I do these in article format as well as my PFL predictions and stuff like that on the WeWantPicks.com premium membership service, but you can get access to a lot of other things as well for $10 per month, a 3-day free trial if you do sign up using my code ARTEM. And I did also want to take this moment to thank everybody for the 7,000 subscriber mark. My goal kind of in my head was to reach 7,000 subscribers before Contender Series week number 7, and I mean, that happened. So, 4 weeks ahead, so that's awesome. So thanks everyone for the support. Been a lot of support on the UFC cards recently, and also the Contender Series as well, so I do appreciate it. But with that being said, let's now get into my predictions for week number 3. So kicking off the card is going to be Jack Duffy fighting against Nick Piccininni at flyweight, and this should be a very interesting stylistic matchup as we have two grapplers, but two grapplers in different ways, because Jack Duffy is definitely more of a jiu-jitsu specialist. He's been practicing jiu-jitsu for all of his life, and if you do watch his fights, he's a very, very aggressive submission kind of guy, whereas Nick Piccininni is a very good wrestler. He has a very solid wrestling background in college and I believe high school as well, and he has now applied that into his MMA game. Jack Duffy's pretty interesting to me because I feel like he may have potentially, arguably, been given a little bit of a short end of the stick, because he was originally meant to fight against Mitch Raposo. If you guys don't know, Mitch Raposo was signed to the UFC and he fought on short notice, and then he was meant to be booked against Jose Ochoa. And Jose Ochoa, to my understanding, has potentially been signed to the UFC as well. So kind of a lot of interesting sort of stuff going on there, with Jack Duffy not getting signed to the promotion and now having to take on another short notice opponent. This is the third opponent now that he's had to take on, Nick Piccininni. And it's a very difficult matchup for him, I think, because he was originally meant to fight against Raposo, who we know is a pretty good wrestler, and then Jose Ochoa, I would say, was mostly a little bit of a striker, and now he's taking on Nick Piccininni, who is a very, very good wrestler. Now, both of these guys are good grapplers, and we do have Jack Duffy as the BJJ guy. You know it's serious when I've got the notes out. But Jack Duffy's a BJJ guy. He was actually, I believe, homeschooled, but he decided to go to high school so he could become a wrestler. So he has a high school wrestling background, and he does pair that in a little bit with his grappling. Now, Jack Duffy on the feet, I don't think really offers too much. He does just throw a lot of kicks, and I do think that there was a little bit of a red flag in this matchup against this guy called Narek Avgayan, because in the second round, he did start to slow down. The takedowns weren't coming as easy, and Avgayan was able to knock him down and do a lot of damage until, of course, eventually Jack Duffy did end up getting that submission win there. But then against this opponent here in Devin Jackson, he just dominated the fight, really. He took down Devin Jackson all 3 rounds at the start of the round and was able to take back position and control and dominate in back position. That's probably his best skill set, I think, is just being able to take the back very, very well. And with being able to take the back so well, you don't necessarily need to get a takedown on your opponent to be effective, because you, of course, can take the back in a clinch position. Another thing about Jack Duffy as well is he is a fast starter. As soon as the fight starts, he's kind of just running across the cage and then shooting for a takedown. That's kind of what he does. He doesn't mess around on the feet or anything like that. He is now taking on Nick Piccininni, who I have his wrestling credentials here. He is a 3-time D1 All-American, a 4-time Big 12 tournament champion in wrestling. He was training MMA at American Kickboxing Academy, but has now trained and has moved to Fortis MMA. Nick Piccininni, I know he's listed as a shorter fighter here, and although Jack Duffy is a pretty tall guy for the weight class, Piccininni is a massive flyweight. He's absolutely gigantic. He's a big guy, and of course, as you guys can kind of pick up, he is a very good wrestler as well. When he does get his takedowns, he is very dominant on top, and of course, from there, he does actually start to work in quite a bit of grappling. One thing that I was most impressed about Nick Piccininni's game is actually that he has a very good cardio. He took this guy on called Jeremiah Park, who ended up fighting him until the 4th round. And Nick Piccininni in that 4th round was the guy still pushing the action, landed, I believe, 3 jabs in a row, and then just shot for a takedown and got it instantly. And that's another thing about his game as well, is I feel like out of the two, he's probably the more technical, more comfortable striker, I should say. Now, I wouldn't say that he's necessarily like a great striker, because it definitely isn't the main part of his game. He is a wrestler. But I feel like that striking has developed pretty well, and he does seem pretty comfortable on the feet, even though I wouldn't call him an elite striker, if that does make sense. Now, I think this is a tough matchup both ways, because I do think that Jack Duffy probably could get taken down from Nick Piccininni with his wrestling background and the size, and the fact that Jack Duffy probably will be willing to pull guard. The thing about Jack Duffy that I did notice, though, is that he has just been dominant in all of his grappling kind of MMA fights that he had recently. He did take a big period of time off, so it'll be interesting to see how he looks like when he gets taken down. But I am going to go with the short notice guy here, Nick Piccininni. I feel like I can trust him to always be ready, always be in shape. And I do think that he should be able to get the takedowns and be able to control on top. Now, Piccininni's style isn't necessarily super exciting, so it'll be interesting to see how it kind of goes in the eyes of Dana White. But if he's able to maybe find a finish or something, it'll be interesting to see. But the way that Piccininni wins his fights is getting takedowns and then controlling on top. And I'm going to predict for that to happen in this fight. And now we have a very fun matchup between Malcolm Wellmaker and Adam Bramhald. I've been getting a lot of messages about Adam Bramhald. A lot of people in my comments have been telling me about Adam Bramhald. And I do understand why you can like him, because he is a very fun fighter to watch. He's very much a Muay Thai striker. He's very, very light on his feet. He holds his hands pretty high as well for a Muay Thai guy. And he's just very fast. He throws a lot of leg kicks. In the clinch, he's very dangerous as well, goes for a lot of trip takedowns. He took on another Muay Thai guy in his most recent fight, and Daniel Mallow, and just throughout the entire fight, every time there was a clinch, he just tripped over his opponent and pushed him down to the ground, and didn't want any of the grappling, because Bramhald, for the most part, really is a Muay Thai striker, and I would say that is what he is good at. He does have very good kicks to the legs. He does have those sweeps, which I did just mention, but I did not say that he does get hit a lot as well. This opponent here, in Daniel Mallow, is probably the best opponent he's fought, at least recently, because he really hasn't fought the best guys throughout his career. But Daniel Mallow was landing a couple of nice shots on him, even though Bramhald really was just controlling and dominating the striking in that fight. One thing about Bramhald as well, and this could just potentially be because he's a massive bantamweight, is that he does slow down quite a lot in his fights. And when he does slow down in his fights, his hands do lower, because he starts out the fights with the hands very high. And then as he does get a little bit more tired, the hands do lower a bit, and he does become a little bit more hittable. But he still does have good takedown defense for all 3 rounds. He's taking on Malcolm Wellmaker, and I feel like this is actually somewhat of a stylistic matchup where it is 2 strikers, but I actually was most impressed when looking at Malcolm Wellmaker by his grappling. I think that when this guy does get on the ground, he throws a lot of submissions up, and yes, that can get him put in some bad positions at moments, but I really do like the fact that he is just going for submissions over and over and over again, because I don't think that it will necessarily hurt him too much against someone like Adam Bramhald, who probably isn't going to want anything to do with the grappling. Now, thankfully, I was actually able to find, well, nearly every one of Malcolm Wellmaker's fights, except for his fight against Taylor Moore. I couldn't find that fight, but I was able to find every other one. Malcolm Wellmaker is a striker. He's a lot more of a sniper, because he is a somewhat low volume guy. He does really only throw one shot at a time, but when he does, it's very accurate, it's very well timed, and he typically does want to keep the fight on the feet. He has very good takedown defense, which I think has actually been showcased throughout his entire career, but I would say mostly in his fight here against Chase Butwell, even though Butwell was able to take him down a couple of times, and then this guy, Zachariah Kamara, was trying to take him down the whole fight as well, but he did showcase pretty good takedown defense in all of those fights there. On the feet, he is a sniper. He does have one-shot power. He only really does throw one shot at a time. He doesn't really throw that many combinations, but when he does, he is typically throwing leg kicks as well as the straight shots as well from range. It's going to be a matchup between 2 guys that are going to want to fight from range, but I think that Wellmaker, if he wants to, can actually push some offensive takedowns, and I don't mind his grappling at all in this matchup. Another thing that I do like about Malcolm Wellmaker is that when I was watching his fights in the 3rd round against Zachariah Kamara, he was looking pretty fresh. even though he had to defend takedowns against Chase Butwell the entire first round, I thought he still looked pretty fresh in the second round. Even though in the second round he did get taken down by Butwell, he was able to knock him out pretty brutally. It was a very, very nice one-shot KO win there. And he did defend takedowns that whole fight and showed pretty good takedown defense doing that. I am going to pick Malcolm Wellmaker to win this fight. I think that it is a very, very close matchup though, because Bramhald throws significantly more volume. He's a very, very high volume guy, but by doing that, he does leave himself pretty open, and Wellmaker is more of a low volume sniper, sort of one-shot, sort of attacker, some striker, I should say, but he can wrestle and he also can grapple as well. And I do like just the fact that he's a little bit more well-rounded from what I was able to see anyway. So I am going to pick Wellmaker here. I think also the fact that I did see Bramhald slow down a lot in the third round, especially against Daniel Mello. If Wellmaker's the fresher guy in round 3, I think he could really go for it and maybe find a knockout or a submission late in the fight. So a late finish potentially for Malcolm Wellmaker. And now we can move on to the middleweights. I believe there's 2 middleweight fights on this one, and the first one is Marco Tulio fighting against Matthieu Duclos. I was very, very interested by Matthieu Duclos' most recent fight, and you can find them pretty easily. I'm pretty sure both of them are actually just on YouTube. And I was very confused because he did fight against this guy called Alexis Fontes, and in that fight, Fontes takes him down pretty early into the fight, and then throughout the whole minute and 18 seconds really that the fight lasts, he has a leg lock in, and Matthieu Duclos is trying to escape that leg lock. And then what actually ends up happening is, as Duclos escapes the leg lock and stands up, he may have potentially poked Fontes in the eye, or maybe like his heel or something kicked him in the eye, and Fontes just kind of wants to end the fight, and then the ref ends the fight by TKO when it could have maybe been argued to be a no contest. And then low-key, a very interesting finish happened against Gayson Santamoreno, and I actually have it written down here because I don't really know how else to describe it. But against Moreno, it looked like he quit because he back of headshots. So what happened in the Gleison Santamoreno fight was Gleison Santamoreno was laying on his back because Duclos was absolutely lighting up his legs the whole time. He's got very good leg kicks, and Moreno was laying on his back. And it looked like Duclos went to dive on top of him and take side control from the position, and may have potentially accidentally kneed him in the head. And then Moreno just quits from there. Yeah, but I guess maybe he was arguing back at the headshots. It was weird. Very, very weird fights that I've been watching from Duclos. And then the time that he did lose was against Yusuf Quabas, where both of these guys just went to war, to be honest with you. And he was walking around like a zombie, and he got finished by that way. What I'm trying to say about Duclos is that he is a absolutely massive middleweight. He is very, very dangerous on the feet. He's got very, very dangerous leg kicks. I think he's got very dangerous striking in general, but I do worry a little bit just kind of about everything else. I don't really know how good his takedown defense is because he was able to get taken down by Fontes. I don't really know how good his grappling is in general because he just is having fights on the feet. And although I think that he actually probably will be the better striker out of the two, and that might be a bit of a hot take because I think a lot of people think that Marco Tulio striking is, in my opinion, a little bit better than it actually is. I don't think that he can defend the takedowns of Marco Tulio. Now, what I do worry about is that Marco Tulio is going to come out into this fight with a game plan to strike because he didn't get the contract in the last fight. But the reason why he didn't get the contract has kind of come down to quite a few potential reasons. I've heard that it was a short notice replacement for the Belgari fight, which it was, but also they didn't like the fact that Yusri Belgari was sick, and Tulio didn't really capitalize on that, so we didn't get a full 100% Belgari, apparently. There's kind of a lot of reasons, I guess, kind of from behind the scenes, but it doesn't matter. Tulio didn't get the contract, and then he looked really good in his return to Kemi dos Santos. In that fight against Kemi dos Santos, he looked very, very fast on the feet. He was punching, he was jabbing to the head, to the body, looking pretty nice. He was getting his takedowns as well with the clinch. He was looking very good on the ground as well, and he did end up getting a one-shot knockout, kind of just straight out of the clinch, really. I do worry about this matchup somewhat. Now, I think that Marco Tulio will potentially be a massive favourite. We might see him be the biggest favourite on the card, and I am going to pick him to win by submission. But I do just worry a little bit about the striking. I don't think that Marco Tulio striking is actually as good as what a lot of people think it is. I think he does lack a little bit of defense, and I also think he does too much on the feet as well. Like, you see this guy throwing flying knees and spinning kicks against Kimura Santos. I think he even threw spinning kicks against Yusri Balgari and got capitalized against too, because Yusri Balgari was sniping him on the feet for moments in that fight. So I worry about that, but Duclos at the end of the day, he's just a weird fighter to tape study, man. I don't really know how to describe it. I'll be honest, he's just a very dangerous striker, but I do think Tulio can go out there. I think he's going to get the takedowns, and I think when he does get the takedowns, he's going to get a submission in the first or the second round. Now we can move on to Michael Aswell taking on Bogdan Grad. Now, this is a fight which I'm not too confident in, I will be honest with you, because both guys, I feel like, are actually somewhat of another mirror matchup in a way, because both guys are good boxers. Michael Aswell is a boxer that really loves to stand in the pocket. Now, that is a good thing and also a bad thing. The good thing is that he is always pressuring forward against his opponent, and he's always landing big shots because of it. But the bad thing is that he stays in the pocket for way too long, and he even got caught doing that against Yadir Devel, who was able to actually get him with a very good counter and drop him in the first round of that fight, and then was able to win by just kind of taking the back. Aswell is a very pressure-forward fighter. He does crash forward a lot in the pocket. He does throw a lot of strikes in the pocket. And overall, I would say he is probably actually the more technical striker out of these two. And I would say he's definitely the better boxer out of these two. One thing that I do worry about Michael Aswell is just the fact that in the first round, he is very, very aggressive. But then he slows down a lot, and he becomes a lot more low volume in round 2 and round 3. And that especially did happen in his fight against Josh Altum, which I do believe actually lasted quite a pretty long period of time. That went to round 4, ended by doctor stoppage. But in round 1, if you watch it, Michael Aswell looks really, really good. He's throwing high volume, he's landing big shots. Altum was landing some pretty good shots as well. And then in round 2 and 3, the volume definitely decreased. But one thing I will say is in the 4th round, or 3rd round, I should say, he was looking fine though. Like the cardio was looking good, and he was able to push a pace. And I think that's one thing that he's definitely going to have a very big advantage over Bogdan Grad in, is the cardio, because I have seen Bogdan Grad slow down before. Bogdan Grad, thankfully, his tape is very easy to find. It's all on UFC Fight Pass. Aside from this fight against Renzo Mendes, I couldn't find it anywhere for some reason, which was pretty disappointing. But the thing that I don't necessarily love too much about Bogdan Grad is this fight against Tudor Damenji, and I know I'm looking at a fight that is from 2022, but Tudor Damenji was lighting him up in moments. At the end of the first round, although Damenji did get dropped, before that happened, he was landing clean boxing combinations on Bogdan Grad, and then in round 2, Tudor Damenji was beating him up, and then he got the spinning heel kick out of nowhere, and he was gassed out as well in that moment, I should say as well. He was literally gassed, and then he got the spinning heel kick KO win. He goes out there against Tom Nolan, he does get knocked out, kind of just went in exchange with Tom Nolan, and when you do that with Tom Nolan, someone's going to get knocked out, and in that case it was Bogdan Grad. Since then though, he has now moved down to 145 pounds, which I do think is a much more natural division for him, as he was tiny for 155. The thing about Bogdan Grad is that he's got very strong leg kicks and a pretty decent jab. He also does pressure forward as well. On the takedown defense side, he doesn't really have the best takedown defense because he does choose to shoot a guillotine. He did that against this guy here, Batista, but it ended up working. He got the guillotine very early on into the fight. But then Breno Moreno, I believe, in the first round shot a takedown against him, and he also pulled guillotine in that matchup and was also controlled on top, but he was able to reverse with about a minute and 15 seconds left, I think, and was able to be very dominant and show pretty good control on top if he can get in that position. But for the most part, I would say that he is definitely a boxer. Now, that is kind of it really. I think he is going to be more powerful than Bogdan Grad, but I am just worried about the cardio. So I feel like in this, he's going to be more powerful than Aswell, I should say, but I am still worried a little bit about the cardio. That's why I'm going to pick Bogdan Grad in this matchup. Very low confidence pick. I do think that Michael Aswell is actually the better boxer out of the two. I actually also think that he does have the better cardio out of the two as well. But I do think the guy that is going to be landing the more significant strikes is Grad. He's got very powerful kicks. He's got very good boxing as well. And if he needs to, I don't mind the idea of Grad actually looking to grapple a little bit. And that's the pick. That's a very low confidence pick. I am going to side with Bogdan Grad. Tapology is kind of making it look like it could be an underdog prediction potentially, but I think that I'll when the odds drop, this is going to be a very even matchup, because I do see it as an even fight. So I feel like maybe this is just kind of a fight which, you know, if Bogdan Grad looks like he's gassing out, Aswell might be able to take over. But I like the aggression of Grad, I like the power of Grad, and that's kind of where the pick has kind of fallen there in that matchup. And now on this main event, we have two middleweights. My initial thought when this fight was actually announced was that I was going to pick Andrey Pulyaev, because I have been somewhat familiar with him. But then I watched the tape on Liam Anderson, and I was actually very impressed. I think that Liam Anderson is like a lot better than what he just kind of looks like on paper, if that makes sense. He had a very, very good amateur career, which lasted quite a few years from 2014 to 2018. That's a good thing. You like to see that. He was finishing these guys in amateur as well. Once again, you do like to see that. And then he does come into his professional career, and he does take a couple of losses pretty early on. Personally, I don't really mind a loss to Miles Lee all too much, because Miles Lee, in my opinion, is actually a pretty solid wrestler and is a pretty good prospect. But the loss to Thomas Powell, he did just get caught, and it was very early on into his career, so it is what it is. But I feel like the more recent performances are actually where we have seen all of the improvements that Liam Anderson has been making. Liam Anderson is a grappler. I wouldn't consider him a striker, even though he does spend a lot of time on the feet. And I would say that's probably his main game, is the fact that he is a grappler, because sometimes he does struggle to get the takedown. On the feet, he is very good offensively, but he does lack a little bit of defense. I don't think he's really got the best head movement necessarily. I don't really think he's got the best defense on the feet either. But when he is moving forward, he loves to throw the head kick. Now, this is a good thing and a bad thing. I don't always love it when a fighter throws heaps and heaps of head kicks, because, of course, it is a pretty tiring shot to throw. And I do feel like he can leave himself open sometimes when throwing that head kick. But I will say it has worked out pretty well. He was landing multiple head kicks against this opponent, Jay Manning, who, in my opinion, was a much better striker than him. And then against Maurice Morris, he knocked him out with the head kick pretty early on into the fight. And that's one thing that I have in my notes. It's just that he does do a lot of head kicks. I feel like the head kick might not be as open against Andrey Pulyaev, though, as it has been against other opponents. Because looking into Pulyaev, I believe they had him listed at like 196 centimeters, which is 6'4". So he's very tall. But the thing about him being very tall for 185 pounds is that he's very slim for 185 pounds. So I guess maybe he's going to lose a little bit of just kind of natural strength or muscle to defend the takedowns of Anderson, because he's going to be the one that definitely wants to keep the fight on the feet. On the feet, he throws a lot of body kicks. He doesn't like pressure, which is what Anderson does. He pressures forward a lot, and he's got very bad cardio. He was gassed at the end of round 1 and the start of round 2 against Kondratov. So this fight here against Nikita Kondratov, he was gassed out. In the round 1, Nikita Kondratov was actually shooting for takedowns against him. And another thing that he was doing was landing a lot of body shots against him. And in the end of round 1, Pulyaev visibly looked tired. And usually when you kind of see a guy visibly look tired at the end of a round, even end of round 1, it's not necessarily always the worst thing, because what you can kind of see is how they look at the start of round 2. And, you know, do they have 4 minutes of good round 2 cardio? Andrey Pulyaev did not have that. He did come out into round 2, and he did look tired. And when he slows down, I think he's going to be a lot easier to take down for Liam Anderson. And that's kind of where the pick does lie. Andrey Pulyaev is a striker. He's very lanky. On the feet, he throws a lot of kicks. That's kind of all he does, is that he throws a lot of body kicks. He doesn't really like pressure. He doesn't like being brought back, because he wants to throw his kicks, and it's a lot harder to do that when you are moving backwards. And I think that Liam Anderson is going to find success in this matchup, moving forwards, clinching against Andrey Pulyaev, and then attempting the takedowns. Now, Anderson doesn't have the best offensive takedowns. I have seen him struggle to get takedowns quite a bit. He did struggle to take down Jay Manning quite a lot, but as soon as he got it down, he got the finish by rear naked choke, so that's pretty good to see. I think against Pulyaev, he's going to be pressuring Pulyaev backwards, pushing him up against the cage in the clinch, trying to get the takedown. I think he's eventually going to get it. If Andrey Pulyaev doesn't get that round 1 finish by knockout, I think that's where Anderson can take over with his wrestling and his grappling. And I am going to pick Liam Anderson to win by submission in round number 2 or round number 3. And just looking at the Tapology votes, that could be an underdog pick, but I'll be honest with you guys, looking at the tape, I think the odds makers genuinely might favour Anderson, but we're going to be interested to see, of course, when the odds do drop. But with that being said, let me know what you think of my predictions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I feel like this is actually the card where I think a lot of people will have different picks, and that's what's going to make it super interesting. But of course, with that being said, let me know what you think again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.